Hey guys, today is Wednesday, March 17th, 2021. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. So we're going to take a quick look here at the city of Toronto. Pretty much looking at the electoral prospects for 2022 because we are in a very interesting situation, as we all know. I made a video about just the current prospects in Ontario right now and in Canada. And I thought I'd complete the set and do one about Toronto. So the interesting thing about Toronto is we're going to have an election for sure in 2022, which means it's going to be the same year as the provincial election and possibly the same year as the federal election. So that's going to be a lot to look at if you're a voter in Toronto. And there's a lot of interesting trends that have defined elections in Toronto since amalgamation, certainly in 1997, 1998. So let's take a quick look at the map as it currently looks. Last election, John Tory pretty much won very easily over Jennifer Keysmat. This is a ward-by-ward breakdown. So Toronto used to have how many was it? Maybe 44 or 45 wards. Now it's down to 25. This is because of some action that Doug Ford took immediately before, just before the Toronto municipal election. That was quite controversial. But nevertheless, these are the districts that we currently have, and we can still see the general trend here that in downtown Toronto, support for John Tory wasn't very strong. And in the suburbs, it was much stronger. You can see here by the deeper green, that means more support for John Tory. So I guess what we can glean from this is that, if John Tory is going to win another election in Toronto, he's going to have to retain this suburban support. Not necessarily downtown. It doesn't seem downtown is the most important thing for John Tory to win in this situation. It all depends on what kind of candidates we get in the next election. All indications are that 2022 should be an election where we have somebody run to the left of John Tory and somebody run to the right. Question is, how suitable will each one of those candidates be? We could argue in the 2018 mayoral election, Jennifer Keysmat was certainly a left-leaning candidate, but the right-leaning candidate, I believe is Faith Goldie, I think, basically... insignificant, 3% of the vote. And anybody who knows who Faith Goldie is, she's a white supremacist, not a great person. But nevertheless, there wasn't a serious right-wing contender for John Tory at the time. So in 2022, if we do get somebody on the right to challenge John Tory, some people have theorized it could be Mel Lastman's son, apparently, was an interesting thought. Didn't quite materialize in the 2018 election, but 2022 still a year away, still plenty of time for somebody from the right to challenge John Tory. John Tory, historically, he is a PC, progressive conservative, but certainly to win Toronto and to retain the support he has, he's certainly leaned to the left in more recent years. So let's take a look at just generally, historically, how Toronto seems to vote. Toronto is not by... I guess a lot of people think Toronto in general is a super left-leaning place. And you're right to a certain extent. It really depends what we're talking about when we talk about Toronto, right? Because Toronto, we talk about it federally, it's a liberal stronghold, right? Provincially right now, it's a mix of NDP and some conservative. And municipally, this is no parties on the municipal level, right? But we can tell from certain candidates where the support for left and right kind of comes from. So Toronto is historically broken up into 6 districts. Ever since 1997, they've held elections using these borders to represent the city of Toronto. So you could say that Old Toronto, East York, and York tend to vote the same way in elections, whereas Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, oftentimes they will go for the other way, for the other candidate. Could say that maybe there's some swinging going on around here between both parties. Let's take a quick look at the first election that happened under amalgamation. That was 1997. So this was an election between Mel Lastman and Barbara Hall. So Mel Lastman, he was the mayor of North York, and Barbara Hall was the mayor of the old city of Toronto at the time of this election. And so this is very much Mel Lastman, kind of a right-wing candidate, and Barbara Hall, kind of a left-wing candidate. Anywho, if we look at the distribution here, it was very close, relatively close election. Looks like only a difference of maybe 40,000 votes or so between the two of them. But you see, geographically speaking, Mel Lastman only won in the north, and he still ran away with the election. You know, Barbara Hall, she won districts downtown, but clearly not by a big enough margin to make a difference for the rock-solid support that we find up here, definitely in the upper part of the suburbs. So Barbara Hall, she did make a couple of, she's the mayor of basically downtown Toronto here, so you can see the southern parts here. You could argue these are the more affluent parts of Etobicoke and Scarborough. They went for Barbara Hall, whereas the north overwhelmingly went for Mel Lastman, and he sealed it up there pretty well. And we can see, as the trend is in Toronto politics, after mayors win the first one, they usually win the second election by some really big margin. You can see here, this is almost 80% of the vote Mel Lastman had the next time. 2003, this is when things kind of get interesting because we have more of a breaking up of the candidates, and this is when we see the first left-wing mayor of Toronto, David Miller, actually win his election. So if we look here, this is the map from 2003. David Miller, he's in orange, he's winning all the downtown here, and he's able to expand into a little bit of North York and a little bit of Etobicoke here, a little bit of Scarborough as well. Some of these areas which they were solid for Mel Lastman before. Miller comes in, he takes them, and that really makes a difference because John Tory, he's got nothing downtown pretty much. It's a lock for David Miller, being that he's the most left-wing candidate. This one I thought was interesting. Number 12 for John Nunziata. This is very much a regional thing, because if we look at the list here, John Nunziata, he's in fourth out of the list, only 36,000 votes, but all concentrated in this little part of the city right here. So he ran away with that part. The rest of it is Miller and Tory. This is when John Tory was significantly more right-wing. But yeah, we'll see this continue. So 2006, this election, David Miller won the first one. This one he wins pretty handily now. There's only two districts here. I believe they were for Tory in 2003. And they go to Jane Pitfield, who actually I don't really know anything about her so much. I guess she was more right-wing than David Miller, but not exactly a close election there. If we go into 2010, this is where things get very interesting with Toronto. This is the election where Rob Ford won. And here we can see the real division between downtown and uptown. And how, downtown candidates whose base of support is downtown, they definitely need the suburbs to win. But candidates who are based in the suburbs, they don't need downtown. They don't have to worry about it. This is a great example of that, because we look here, Rob Ford, basically he cleans up all the suburbs here. Etobicoke, it's a lock. Well into actually parts of York here, borough of York, Old Borough. Rob Ford's able to win a lot of these districts here. George Smitherman, he's got a lock only on downtown pretty much. You can see the support in other parts of the city is not very strong. Certainly he's splitting the vote with Joe Pantalone. He's you could say he's kind of the more NDP guy. George Smitherman, I can tell by the red, he used to be Liberal cabinet minister. Joe Pantalone, he was a city councillor for a long time, more NDP leaning. So you could see that parts of the city of Toronto that are now, these parts are now provincially, they're NDP. So you can see the support for Smitherman wasn't that strong there, especially this number 18. This is Davenport, actually. It's interesting how top of Davenport went for Rob Ford. The bottom went just barely for Smitherman. Might as well have gone for Joe Pantalone. It's an interesting breakdown between downtown and uptown here. And we'll see how in 2014, in order to really switch it up, John Tory is victorious in 2014 over Rob Ford's brother, Doug Ford, who's now the premier of the province. But you can see here, there's kind of the same split, because in 2014, the Ford brothers, they still maintain this area here, Davenport, but down here, John Tory, As we know, John Tory is not a downtown guy, but given the choice, it seems between Rob Ford and somebody else, people stuck with Tory over Olivia Chow. But Olivia Chow still had enough support to retain these three districts down here. These are very left-leaning districts. I think this is Parkdale, High Park, or bottom half of Davenport here. John Tory marginally able to win down here in the downtown and in Etobicoke. This is the big difference maker. North York. He wins securely up here in North York. Basically, Rob Ford and Doug Ford, both of them, they really solidify their support of Etobicoke. You can see some districts here, they got even more blue than they did last time. But Tory, able to flip down here, southern Etobicoke. He's able to flip at least one district here in Scarborough. But the support in Scarborough is a little bit... it's actually interesting. The support in Scarborough is very much the same for the Ford brothers. So the Ford brothers maintain a lot of their support in the suburbs. But John Tory able to break in just enough in Etobicoke and North York to carry this one 40%, 33%. This is a very, very, very close election, I would say. Goes to show that Toronto is certainly not that left-leaning all the time. And Conservatives definitely have the ability to win, certainly in these suburban districts here in Etobicoke and Scarborough. They can win these ridings for sure. Now, they haven't been successful at this at the federal level, but what we'll have to look at now is that 2022, if there's a left-leaning or right-leaning candidate, looks like John Tory, his support is in the suburbs. So if there's a downtown candidate that can really inspire the downtown and maybe grab a few people out here. It's not impossible for a left-leaning candidate to win Toronto, but I think this urban and suburban divide is clearly obvious, and in order to break it, I think we have to look at some candidates on the left who are known in Scarborough, or perhaps, the city of Toronto itself, the old city of Toronto, I think will go for a left-leaning candidate regardless of where in the city they're from. If you can get somebody who's left-leaning from Scarborough or from Etobicoke to run, and, that's where their base of support is, I don't know who that could be. Could be a city councilor from one of those areas, But, you get somebody like that to run, and perhaps you can see that you can get a result similar to the 2003 result, where pretty much David Miller ran away with it just by taking a few districts up here. And so, you need somebody to do that. John Tory, I think he's favorited for sure to win the 2022 election. I think, there's a fair amount of frustration in Toronto. I live in downtown Toronto, and I could say, most people are... It's hard to be furious at John Tory, but at the same time, it's hard to be kind of satisfied with John Tory. He's kind of a neutral kind of character, so there's not really a movement towards opposing him that much, I find. The left has to find an opponent that can really draw into some of this suburban support, and I think the right would basically have to find somebody to replace this suburban support. And we can argue that 2014, when given the option of a more right-leaning candidate, they usually these suburbs will go for the more right-leaning candidate rather than John Tory. And this is when John Tory is probably his most popular, So John Tory could probably easily win if he runs the third term. Even in this election here, he was squeezed by a left-leaning and a right-leaning candidate, was able to pull it through. We know if it's just one-on-one that he'll run away with it as well. So it will have to be a divided field, but I do think John Tory could lose, but only if it's a 2003 type scenario. So only if you have somebody, and I have to argue it would have to be somebody on the left who can really take take a bite out of some suburbs here while keeping the downtown. And then this will, if you don't have a serious candidate on the right, this will choke Tory, much like the 2003 election here, where, he didn't have Etobicoke, or he had Etobicoke, but he didn't have any of the downtown, and he split Scarborough. So That's what you have to do, basically, 2022. If you're not John Tory, do something like this. Take the downtown, take a couple of the suburbs. But that is the main theory here for Toronto, and thank you so much for listening.